Hey there, Star Wars fans. Today we're exploring one of the darkest hypothetical scenarios in the galaxy far, far away. What if Anakin Skywalker, now consumed by the persona of Darth Vader, attempted to resurrect his greatest loss by cloning the woman he destroyed everything for? This isn't just a story about bringing someone back from the dead. This is about obsession, the nature of identity, and how even the most powerful Dark Lord of the Sith cannot escape the consequences of his choices. Before we begin, I want you to consider something. The entire tragedy of Anakin Skywalker revolves around his inability to accept loss. He turned to the dark side specifically to prevent Padmé's death, and in doing so, became the very instrument of her destruction. So what happens when that mind, twisted by years of self-hatred and dark side corruption, gains access to technology that might offer a second chance? Let's explore this together. First, we need to establish that cloning is absolutely possible in the Star Wars universe, and Vader would have access to this technology. The Kaminoans created the entire Grand Army of the Republic through advanced cloning techniques, producing millions of identical soldiers from Jango Fett's genetic template. These weren't just simple copies either. The Kaminoans could accelerate growth, modify behavioral traits, and even enhance specific abilities. Now, here's where it gets interesting. After the Clone Wars ended, the Empire didn't just abandon this technology. According to canon sources, including the novel Thrawn, alliances and references throughout various media, the Empire continued cloning research, though it became highly classified. Palpatine himself was obsessed with cloning, ultimately creating multiple clone bodies for himself, as detailed in The Rise of Skywalker and the expanded materials around it. This means the facilities, the expertise and the resources all existed. Vader, as the Emperor's right hand and enforcer, would have had access to these black site laboratories. We know from Lords of the Sith and other novels that Vader commanded immense resources and operated with significant autonomy when pursuing his personal missions. If anyone could commandeer an Imperial cloning facility for a secret project, it would be him. But here's the crucial question: would he actually do it? To answer that, we need to understand Vader's psychology in the years following Revenge of the Sith. The Darth Vader we see in the comics published by Marvel, particularly the 2017 and 2020 series, is not a man at peace with his transformation. He's a walking wound, consumed by rage, self-loathing, and an obsession with the past that never truly fades. In Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, we see him return to Mustafar, building his fortress on the very site of his greatest defeat. This isn't moving on. This is someone who keeps tearing open his own scars. Charles Soule's run on the Vader comics shows us that immediately after Revenge of the Sith, Vader went through a period where he tried to completely suppress Anakin Skywalker's memories and emotions. He viewed Anakin as weak, as the part of himself that failed. But suppression isn't the same as elimination. Throughout every Vader story, we see glimpses of Anakin breaking through, particularly anything involving Padme. In the 2015 Vader comic series, when Vader discovers Luke exists, his entire demeanor shifts. For the first time since his transformation, he has a connection to his past that isn't just painful. He has a son. Someone of Padmé's bloodline still lives. The intensity of his reaction tells us everything about how deeply his feelings for Padme still run, decades after her death. So, would Vader attempt to clone Padme? Based on his demonstrated inability to let go, his access to resources, and his willingness to defy even Palpatine when his personal interests are at stake, I believe he absolutely would. The question isn't if, but when, and what would happen when he tried. Let's walk through how this would actually unfold. Vader would need genetic material from Padme, which presents our first major obstacle. Her body was buried on Naboo after her state funeral. According to Queen's Shadow and other materials about Naboo customs, she was likely embalmed and preserved according to traditional practices. For someone with Vader's resources and determination, retrieving a genetic sample would be challenging, but far from impossible. Imagine Vader, perhaps 5 or 6 years after Revenge of the Sith, during a period when his pain feels particularly unbearable. He's just completed another mission of destruction in the Emperor's name. He returns to his fortress on Mustafar, and in that meditation chamber of his, where he can finally remove his mask, the weight of what he's lost crushes him once again. This is when he would make the decision. He would travel to Naboo in secret, using his authority to ensure no records of the visit exist. Under cover of darkness, he would infiltrate the royal crypts. Think about this moment. The man who killed Padme, standing before her tomb. The Dark Lord of the Sith, the most feared being in the galaxy, breaking into a grave like a common thief because he cannot live with what he's done. It's almost Shakespearean in its tragedy. With genetic material secured, Vader would commandeer one of the Empire's secret cloning facilities. He would kill or mind trick everyone involved to ensure total secrecy. Even Palpatine cannot know about this. The Emperor would view it as weakness, as Anakin's sentimentality poisoning Vader's usefulness. Worse, Palpatine might see it as an opportunity to manipulate Vader further, and Vader knows this. Now, here's where our scenario becomes truly dark. Let's say the cloning process works. After months of accelerated growth, Vader stands before a cloning tank containing a perfect genetic copy of Padme Amidala. She has Padme's face, her body, her voice. But what else does she have? This is the fundamental problem with cloning as resurrection, and it's something Star Wars has explored through characters like the clone troopers and even Rey's father in the sequel trilogy. A clone is not the original person. They don't have the same memories, experiences, or personality development that shaped the original individual. This clone would be essentially a blank slate with Padme's appearance. Imagine Vader's realization as she emerges from the cloning tank. She looks at him with Padme's eyes, but there's no recognition. No love, no memory of Naboo, of secret marriages, of whispered promises. She doesn't remember Anakin Skywalker, because she never knew him. She's terrified because she's waking up in a strange place, looking at a mechanical monster. For Vader, this would be devastating in a way that even Padme's death wasn't. When Palpatine told him he killed her, at least Vader could tell himself she died knowing who he was, that their love was real, even if it ended in tragedy. But this is undeniable proof that you cannot undo your mistakes. You cannot resurrect the dead. You cannot go back. The clone might even remind Vader of why he fell in the first place, but in the cruelest possible way. He destroyed everything to save Padme from death, and now he has proof that even if he had succeeded, it wouldn't have mattered. The person is more than just their physical form. This is where we enter truly speculative territory, but based on Vader's character, I see a few possibilities, none of them good. The first possibility is that Vader, in a moment of rage and despair, destroys his own creation. He's done this before, when confronted with painful reminders of his failure. In the comics, we see him demolish droids, kill subordinates, and tear apart anything that reflects his inadequacy back at him. The clone of Padme, who looks like her, but isn't her, would be the ultimate mirror of his failure. He might kill her and destroy all evidence of the experiment, returning to his existence of service to the Emperor, as if it never happened. The second, darker possibility is that Vader tries to make it work anyway. He could attempt to train her, educate her, force her to become Padme through exposure to information about the original. Think about how twisted this is. He would essentially be trying to brainwash a person into becoming someone else. He might show her hollows of Padme, tell her stories about their life together, Try to recreate their relationship with someone who has no organic connection to those events. This would be an act of such profound selfishness and delusion that it would represent a new low, even for Vader. The third possibility, and perhaps the most interesting from a storytelling perspective, is that the clone develops her own identity and rebels against Vader. She has Padmé's genetics, which means she potentially has Padmé's strength of will, intelligence, and moral courage. Once she understands what Vader did, both in creating her and in his original crimes, she might become his enemy. Imagine a character with Padmé's face, dedicated to opposing everything Vader represents. The psychological warfare alone would be devastating. What makes this scenario so compelling isn't just the darkness of it, but what it reveals about Star Wars' central themes. The saga has always been about choice, redemption, and accepting that some things cannot be undone. Anakin's fall happened because he couldn't accept the natural order of life and death. He wanted to control the uncontrollable. A cloning attempt would be the ultimate expression of that same flaw. It's Vader refusing to learn the lesson, refusing to accept that his choices have permanent consequences. And the failure of that attempt, the realization that even with all his power and all the Empire's technology, he cannot bring back what he destroyed, would be a crucial step toward his eventual redemption. In the original trilogy, Vader's redemption comes through his son. Luke represents possibility, the future, something new, rather than an attempt to resurrect the past. Luke is proof that something good came from Vader's relationship with Padme, something that can exist independent of his mistakes. A clone of Padme would be the opposite, a desperate attempt to erase history, to pretend the tragedy never happened. George Lucas often talked about Star Wars being a story about letting go. Yoda tells Anakin directly in Revenge of the Sith, "Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose." Anakin's inability to follow that advice destroyed him. A cloning attempt would show that even years later, Vader still hasn't learned this lesson. And the failure of that attempt would be the universe telling him once again that some truths cannot be avoided. So why explore this dark hypothetical? Because it helps us understand the depth of Vader's tragedy and the long road to his redemption. The Darth Vader we meet in A New Hope seems like pure evil, a monster without humanity. But stories like this, whether in comics, novels, or our own imagination, remind us that underneath that armor is a man in unimaginable pain, making terrible choices because he cannot cope with what he's lost. The beauty of Star Wars is that it doesn't shy away from the consequences of those choices. Vader isn't redeemed because he feels bad about what he's done. He's redeemed because he finally, in the very last moments of his life, makes a selfless choice to save his son rather than preserve himself. That choice only has meaning because we understand how long he spent making the opposite choice, how many times he tried to avoid accepting his reality. A failed cloning attempt would be another chapter in that long, dark journey. Another moment where Vader learns that power isn't the same as control, that the Force cannot give him what he truly wants. And ultimately, that's what makes his final redemption so powerful. He had to lose everything, try everything, fail at everything, before he could finally let go and do the right thing. Thanks for joining me on this dark exploration of what might have been. If you found this analysis interesting, let me know in the comments what other Star Wars hypotheticals you'd like me to explore. May the Force be with you.